The bride. He bought with blood money. 3 days after they put her father in the ground, Elena Vance stood at the end of a cathedral aisle in a white dress she hadn't chosen, walking toward a man she'd never met, to pay off a debt written in her family's blood. The candles burned, the strangers stared, and the crime lord waiting at the altar, Adrian Moreau, a name whispered in every dark corner of the city, didn't look at her like a bride. He looked at her like she was something he'd been waiting on for a very, very long time. If you want to know whether she survived the man who bought her, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It came down on the rooftops of the Vance house in slow, punishing sheets, and Elena stood at the narrow window of her father's study, watching the gutters overflow onto the garden her mother had planted 20 years ago. The roses were drowning. She hadn't noticed until now. She hadn't noticed a lot of things. Somewhere in the house, someone was laughing. That was what got her. Not crying, laughing, low and careful, the way people laugh at funerals when they think the family can't hear them. Distant cousins, probably. People who'd shown up in black suits that still had the tags on. She could picture them clearly without needing to turn around, standing near the liquor cabinet, helping themselves to her father's Macallan, discussing his business like it was a carcass they were circling. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. 3 days. 3 days since a man in a cheap suit had knocked on the door at 2 a.m. and told her, with the practiced gentleness of someone who'd done it 100 times, that Gregory Vance had driven his car off the Harrow Bridge, that they had recovered the vehicle but not the body, that the current was strong this time of year, that someone would need to come to the station in the morning to sign paperwork. She had signed the paperwork. She had called the funeral home. She had picked out a casket she couldn't fill and a plot she couldn't pay for. And then, yesterday, while she was still wearing the same black dress she'd slept in, a second man had knocked on the door. This one didn't wear a cheap suit. This one wore a coat that probably cost more than the casket, and he had a leather portfolio under his arm. And he had said, very politely, that her father had owed a great deal of money to a man named Adrian Moreau, and that this man would like a word. A word. That was how they said it. Like it was tea. Like it was nothing. Behind her, the study door creaked open. Elena. She didn't turn. Not now, Marcus. You need to come downstairs. I said not now. There was a pause. She could hear her father's lawyer breathing. That thin, wheezing breath he always had. The one that made you feel like you were stealing air from him every time he was in a room. He had been her father's lawyer for 22 years. He had been at her christening. He had given a speech at her 16th birthday. And now he was standing behind her in her dead father's study with something in his voice she had never heard before. Elena, please. She finally turned around. Marcus Hale looked like hell. His tie was crooked, his shirt collar was wet, and there was a smear of what might have been blood on his left cuff. He wasn't a big man, and grief had shrunk him further, but it was the fear in his eyes that made her chest go cold. They're here, he said. She didn't have to ask who. The house had fallen quiet by the time she came down the stairs. The cousins had stopped laughing. The caterers had stopped clattering. Even the rain seemed to have backed off, as though the whole world had agreed to hold its breath. There were 4 men in the foyer. 3 of them were clearly security, wide-shouldered, blank-faced, standing in the corners like they'd been placed there by a set designer. The 4th was the one who'd come yesterday, the one with the leather portfolio. He was speaking quietly to an older woman in a navy coat, Elena's Aunt Teresa, who had flown in from Boston and who had, Elena noted, already drunk most of a bottle of her father's wine. The man with the portfolio saw her first. Miss Vance? He tilted his head in a way that was almost a bow. He had the kind of face you forgot 5 minutes after you looked away from it. My name is Vincent Caro. We spoke yesterday. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. You didn't give me a choice yesterday either, Elena said. Vincent smiled, a small, thin smile that didn't touch any other part of his face. That's fair. He opened the portfolio. Inside were documents, rows and rows of numbers and signatures, and at the top of one page was her father's handwriting, which she would know anywhere. That cramped, slanted scrawl. The way he made his sevens look like ones. The way he pressed down so hard on the pen that you could feel the indentation on the back of the page. She swallowed. How much? Miss Vance, perhaps we should sit down. How much, Mr. Caro? He didn't look at her when he said it. He looked at the document. $11.4 million. Elena heard a sound behind her, a soft, wet intake of breath. Her Aunt Teresa, setting her wine glass on the hall table with hands that had started to shake. 11, Elena said. .4. Yes. That's not possible. I'm afraid it is. My father didn't. He wouldn't. Your father was a good man, Vincent Caro said, and for a second he almost sounded like he meant it. But good men make bad choices when they're desperate, Miss Vance. The shipping business has been in trouble for a long time. Mr. Moreau extended credit when the banks wouldn't. That was a kindness. That was a trap. It was a business arrangement. Elena took a step back. The walls of her father's foyer, walls she had walked past every day of her life, walls with photographs of her mother, her grandmother, a little girl with pigtails at the beach, suddenly felt too close. I don't have $11 million, she said. No, I don't have $11,000. We are aware of your financial situation, Miss Vance. She stared at him. Then what are you doing here? Vincent Caro closed the portfolio with a soft click. He looked up at her, and for the first time he held her eyes, and there was something in his expression that was almost, but not quite, pity. Mr. Moreau, he said, would like to propose an arrangement. She didn't remember walking back upstairs. She didn't remember closing the door to her bedroom. She remembered dimly hearing Marcus Hale outside the door saying her name. Elena. Elena, please, let me explain. And she remembered putting her back against the door and sliding down to the floor and staring at the carpet until the carpet stopped making sense as a thing. An arrangement. That was the word Vincent Caro had used. An arrangement. Marriage. Adrian Moreau wanted to marry her. She laughed. It came out wrong, high and broken and stuck in her throat. She pressed her hand over her mouth and laughed again, and this time it sounded like crying, and then it was crying, and she sat there on the carpet of her childhood bedroom in a black funeral dress and cried until there was nothing left in her chest but a dry, burning ache. 3 days. 3 days ago, her father was alive. 3 days ago, she was 26 years old and teaching art at a community college and worrying about whether her car would make it through another winter. 3 days ago, the biggest problem in her life was a leaking radiator, and now a man she had never met owned her, because that was what it was. Whatever word Vincent Caro wanted to use, arrangement, agreement, understanding, it was ownership. It was a transaction, her father's debt paid off in daughter. She thought about her mother. Her mother had been dead 9 years now, cancer, and Elena could still picture her standing at the kitchen sink humming while she peeled apples. Her mother would have known what to do. Her mother would have stood in that foyer and looked Vincent Caro in the face and told him to go to hell. But her mother wasn't here, and her father wasn't here. And Elena was alone in a house that was about to be taken from her, with $11.4 million of debt she couldn't pay, and a man named Adrian Moreau waiting at the other end of a contract. She thought about running. She thought about it for a long time. And then, very slowly, she got up off the carpet, walked to her closet, and pulled down the suitcase from the top shelf. She didn't get far. She got to the end of the driveway. That was it. She got to the end of the driveway with a suitcase in one hand and her mother's old jewelry box in the other, and she stopped. There was a car parked across the street. Black, unmarked. 2 men inside. They weren't looking at her. That was the thing. They weren't even pretending to look at her. They were reading a newspaper and drinking coffee out of paper cups, and the one in the driver's seat was laughing at something the other one had said. They looked bored. They looked like they'd been bored for a long time. They looked like they would still be sitting there in 6 hours, and tomorrow morning, and the morning after that. Elena stood at the end of her father's driveway in the rain, with a suitcase in her hand, and understood, for the first time since Vincent Caro had opened that leather portfolio, that there was nowhere she could go. She turned around and walked back to the house. She didn't cry this time. That was something. The dress arrived on Thursday. It came in a white box the size of a coffin, carried by 2 men in white gloves, and it was left in the foyer with a card that had no signature on it and one line of typed text, Saturday, 11 a.m., a car will be sent. Elena didn't open the box for a long time. She sat on the staircase and looked at it, and she thought about how her mother had never gotten to help her pick out a wedding dress. She'd thought about that once, years ago, in college, when her roommate got engaged. She'd cried in the bathroom and felt guilty about it for a week. Her mother hadn't gotten to do any of the things. No graduations, no engagements, no grandchildren. And Elena had made her peace with that, as much as you can make peace with something like that. And she had always assumed that whenever her own wedding came, whenever that happened, she would do it for both of them. She would wear her mother's pearls. She would carry her mother's flowers. She would look at the empty chair in the front row and know that her mother was there anyway. That was what she had always assumed. She opened the box. The dress was beautiful. That was what made it worse. It was beautiful in a way that meant somebody had paid attention. The lace was old, real old, the kind of old that made her fingers tremble when she touched it. And the neckline was higher than she would have expected, modest almost, and the sleeves came down past her wrists. Whoever had chosen it had not chosen something sexual. They had not chosen something that screamed ownership. They had chosen something that looked like it belonged on a woman walking into a life she had picked for herself. She didn't know if that made it better or worse. She closed the box. She sat on the staircase and didn't move for a long time. 10. On Friday night, her Aunt Teresa knocked on her bedroom door. Elena. Go away, Aunt Teresa. Elena, honey, open the door. She didn't want to open the door. She had not eaten in 2 days. She had not showered. She had not spoken to anyone except to tell them to leave her alone, and she had become very skilled, in a short time, at telling people to leave her alone. But something in Teresa's voice was different. Not the whine voice, not the sympathetic voice. Something tired and old. Elena opened the door. Teresa came in and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't look at Elena. She looked at her hands. I knew, Teresa said. Elena stood by the door. You knew what? About your father, about the debt. She paused. Not the number. I didn't know the number, but I knew he was in trouble. He called me 3 months ago. Asked if I could lend him anything. I said no. Teresa. I said no because I didn't have it, Elena. I want to be clear about that. I didn't have it, but I could have sold the house in the Cape. I could have sold my mother's ring. I could have done something, and I didn't, because I told myself he was exaggerating, because I told myself Greg always exaggerated, because I was tired of bailing him out. She looked up then. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her mouth was shaking. I'm so sorry, honey. Elena stood very still. A part of her, the small, bitter part that had been growing in her chest for 3 days, wanted to scream, wanted to tell her aunt to get out, wanted to tell her that sorry didn't fix anything, that sorry wasn't $11.4 million, that sorry wasn't going to be standing at the altar tomorrow in a lace dress she hadn't picked, marrying a man who could buy and sell her life. But she didn't say any of that. She sat down on the bed next to her aunt, and she took her hand, and she let her aunt cry into her shoulder, because someone in this house needed to cry, and Elena had run out of tears a long time ago. Tell me something about him, Elena said after a long time. About your father? No. She took a breath. About the man I'm marrying tomorrow. Her Aunt Teresa went very still. Elena. I don't know anything about him. I tried to look him up. There's nothing. There's newspaper articles from 10 years ago about trials that got dropped, and there's a Wikipedia page that's been deleted 3 times, and there's rumors, and there's nothing. There's nothing real. And I'm marrying him tomorrow. Elena, you don't want to know. Yes, I do. Teresa was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin. They say he runs the waterfront, from Harrow Bridge down to the South Docks. They say there's not a crate that comes off a ship in this city without him getting a piece. They say there are people who crossed him, who didn't come back. They say, Teresa. They say a lot of things, honey. What do you say? Her aunt looked at her. For a long moment she didn't speak. I say, she said finally, that a man who could buy you wouldn't have sent a dress that looks like that one. Elena didn't say anything. I don't know what that means, Teresa said. I don't. But I'm telling you, a man like that, with the kind of money your father was into him for, he could have sent anything. He could have sent something that made you look like a toy. And he didn't. That dress downstairs, Elena, that dress belonged to somebody. That dress has history. You don't send a dress with history unless... She stopped. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm an old woman and I'm drunk. Don't listen to me. She stood up. At the door, she stopped. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, without turning around, you call me. You hear? You call me and you tell me you're all right. And if you're not, Elena, you tell me that too. And I'll come get you. I don't care what it takes. I'll come get you. She closed the door behind her. Elena sat on the bed for a long time. Then she got up, walked downstairs, opened the white box in the foyer, and really looked at the dress. The church was on 6th Avenue. She didn't know why that surprised her. Part of her had assumed the wedding would happen in some dark office, or some back room, or some warehouse that smelled like fish and fear. But it was a real church. Brick. Steepled, stained glass. The kind of church where somebody's grandmother had been baptized. The car pulled up at 10:58. The driver, a heavy-set man who hadn't spoken a word the entire drive, got out, opened her door, and offered her a hand. She ignored it. She climbed out of the back seat, holding up the hem of the dress with both hands, and she stood on the wet pavement in a pair of white shoes that pinched her toes, and she looked up at the church. There was nobody outside. No photographers, no guests arriving, no flower girls. The street was empty except for 2 more black cars parked at the curb, and a single man in a long coat standing under the overhang of the church doors, smoking. He dropped the cigarette when he saw her, ground it out with his heel. Miss Vance? She didn't recognize him. She didn't care. Is he inside? Yes, ma'am. Everyone's inside? Yes, ma'am. She took a breath. Let's get this over with. There were maybe 30 people in the pews. That was the first thing she noticed. 30 people, at most, scattered through a church that could have held 300. They sat in small clusters. None of them were smiling. None of them turned around when she came through the doors, which was strange. Weren't you supposed to turn around? Wasn't that the thing people did? And she realized, with a slow cold creep, that nobody had turned around because nobody in this church was here for her. Nobody in this church even knew her. They were here for him. The organ started. It played something she didn't recognize, something slow and heavy. Not the wedding march, not anything she would have picked. And she stood at the end of the aisle in a lace dress that had belonged to someone else, holding a bouquet somebody had put in her hands, and she looked down the long red carpet at the altar. He was already there. Adrian Moreau. She had tried in the last 3 days to picture him. She had built him in her head out of every terrible thing she had ever heard about men like him. Old, heavy, cruel mouth, gold rings. She had pictured a man who would look at her like meat. He didn't look like any of that. He was tall. That was the first thing. Taller than she had expected. He wore a dark suit that fit him the way expensive suits fit people who had always worn expensive suits, and his hair was black, cut short, and his hands were folded in front of him the way men fold their hands at funerals. He was not old. He was not heavy. He was... She made a quick, startled inventory. 35, maybe. 36. And he was not looking at her the way she had prepared herself to be looked at. He was looking at her like she was a ghost. Like she was a ghost he had been expecting for a long time. Elena took her first step down the aisle. The dress caught on her heel. She stumbled, just slightly, just a little hitch, and for a half-second she was sure she was going to fall on her face in front of 30 strangers and a man who could kill her, and she felt a hot flash of hatred for every single person in the room. And then she caught herself, and she kept walking. She didn't look at the pews, she looked at him, because she had decided, lying awake last night, that she was not going to be afraid. Or rather, she was going to be afraid. She couldn't stop that. She wasn't a fool. But she was not going to let him see it. Let him buy her. Let him marry her. Let him put his name on a piece of paper and drag her into whatever bloody, rotten life he lived. She would not give him her fear. That was the one thing that was still hers. So she walked down the aisle and she looked him dead in the eye. And something happened. His face changed, just a fraction. The folded hands tightened, then loosened. A small muscle moved in his jaw. And for one strange, suspended second, she had the feeling, the absolutely certain feeling, that Adrian Moreau was more afraid of this moment than she was. Then the second passed, and his face went still again, and she reached the altar. The priest was old and he was sweating and he would not meet her eyes. She noted that. She noted everything. She noted the way Adrian Moreau's right hand came up, slow, palm open, and he didn't take her hand so much as offer his, like she could choose to take it or not. She didn't take it. He let his hand fall. The priest cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, skip it," Adrian said. It was the first time she heard his voice. It was low and quiet, and there was nothing theatrical in it, nothing cruel, nothing performed. It was just a man telling a priest to get on with it. The priest stammered, Yes, of course. Mr. Moreau, if that's what you'd—" "The vows," Adrian said. "Just the vows." The priest looked at Elena then, for the first time. His eyes were wet. He was a bad priest, Elena decided. A weak one. He was afraid, and he was going to do what the powerful man told him to do, and he was sorry about it, but not sorry enough to stop. "Do you, Adrian Moreau?" the priest began, and his voice cracked, and he started over. "Do you, Adrian Moreau, take this woman?" "I do." He said it before the priest finished, not quickly, not eagerly, just flatly, like he had answered this question a long time ago and was only repeating himself now for the record. "And do you, Elena Vance?" She looked at the man in front of her. She looked at his face, this cold, carved, terrible face that had looked at her like a ghost. And she opened her mouth to say, "I do," and she did not say it. Not right away. For 3 full seconds, she did not say it. The priest went pale. Somebody in the pews coughed. She could feel the air going out of the room. She could feel distantly that she was doing something stupid, something that might get her killed, something that might get the whole congregation killed, and she didn't care. 3 seconds. 3 seconds of silence in a church on 6th Avenue because she needed him to know. Whoever he was, whatever he was, she needed him to know that he had not bought her. He had only rented the words. Then she said, "I do." And Adrian Moreau, the man who owned the waterfront, the man her father had died owing money to, the man who could have had her delivered in a box if he wanted. Adrian Moreau exhaled. She saw it. It was small, but she saw it, like a man who had been holding his breath. The priest fumbled the rings. They exchanged them. His hands were cold. Hers were shaking. "By the power vested in me," the priest began, and Elena didn't hear the rest of it because the rain had started up again outside, hard, battering the stained glass, and somewhere in the back of the church somebody was crying quietly, and Elena realized, too late, only now, standing there with a stranger's ring on her finger, that the person crying was her. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The priest paused. "You may—" "No," Adrian said. The priest stopped. Adrian turned to face her fully. He looked down at her. His eyes, she saw them clearly now, for the first time, in the candlelight, were a strange pale gray, and they were tired, and they were not the eyes of a man who was taking anything. "I won't kiss you," he said, very quietly, so that only she could hear. "Not today. Not unless you want me to." She stared at him. "I don't want you to." "Then I won't." He turned back to the priest. "We're done here," he said. The car ride was silent. He sat across from her in the back of a long black car. He did not try to touch her. He did not try to speak to her. He looked out the window at the rain and the passing gray streets, and she looked at him. At the side of his face, at the small scar under his left ear that she hadn't noticed in the church, at the way he held his hands loosely in his lap like a man forcing himself to stay calm. "Where are we going?" she said finally. He didn't turn his head. "Home. Your home. Yes." "Not mine." He was silent for a moment. "That's for you to decide, Mrs. Moreau." Something snapped in her chest. "Don't call me that." He turned his head then, slowly, and for the first time since the altar, he looked at her, really looked at her. And there was something in his eyes that was not cold and was not cruel and was, she realized with a strange lurch of her stomach, Something much more frightening than either of those things. It was hunger, not for her body. She had seen that kind of hunger before and she knew what it looked like. This was different. This was older. This was the hunger of a man who had wanted something for a very long time and who had finally gotten it and who was already terrified of losing it. "All right," he said quietly. "Elena, then." He turned back to the window. The car drove on through the rain. And Elena sat there, in a borrowed lace dress, with a stranger's ring on her finger, and she understood, with a sick, slow certainty that settled somewhere under her ribs and did not move, that whatever she had thought this was going to be, it was going to be something else entirely. She looked down at her hands. They had finally stopped shaking. That scared her most of all. The estate was 40 minutes outside the city. Elena didn't know that at first. She only knew that the buildings thinned out, and then the streetlights thinned out, and then there was nothing on either side of the car, except dark trees and a low stone wall that ran on forever. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the wall go by, and tried not to count the minutes. Adrian Moreau had not spoken since he'd told her to call him by his first name. He sat across from her with one ankle crossed over his knee, reading something on his phone, and every few minutes the screen light would catch his face and she would steal a look at him. She couldn't help it. She was going to live with this man. She was going to eat meals with him and sleep under the same roof as him and wake up in the morning with his ring on her finger. And she did not know the first thing about him. She did not know if he took sugar in his coffee. She did not know if he had any brothers or sisters. She did not know if he had ever loved anybody or if anybody had ever loved him. She did not know what he had done to the men who had crossed him, and she did not know whether he planned to do anything to her. All she knew was that he had looked at her at the altar the way a man looks at something he's been dreaming about for years. That scared her more than the guns would have. The car slowed. A gate came into view, tall, black iron, set into the stone wall. Two men stood beside it in dark coats. They didn't raise a hand, didn't speak, didn't even seem to look at the car. The gate simply opened. The car rolled through. And then Elena saw the house. It wasn't a house. That was the first thing. Calling it a house was like calling the Grand Canyon a ditch. It was a long, low, dark building of gray stone, 3 stories tall at the center and 2 stories along the wings, with narrow windows and a slate roof that shone in the rain. There were lights on inside. Not many, just a few, scattered. And there was a fountain in the circular drive that had been turned off for the weather. It looked, Elena thought, like something out of a movie she would not have wanted to watch alone. The car pulled up to the front steps. Adrian put his phone away. He looked at her for the first time in 40 minutes. "You don't have to come in tonight," he said. She turned her head. "What?" "If you'd rather stay in the car, drive back to the city, sleep at a hotel, I'll have someone take you." He paused. "You'd come back tomorrow, but tonight, if you need tonight, you can have it." She stared at him. "Why?" she said. He didn't answer right away. "Because today was a lot," he said finally. "For you. I'm aware of that." "Today was a lot," she repeated. There was a sound in her throat that was almost a laugh. "Today was a lot. That's what you're calling it." "Elena, you bought me, Mr. Moreau. I married you. Don't." "I didn't buy you. You paid $11.4 million for me to stand in a church and say yes to you," she said, and her voice was steadier than she expected. "And now you're, what, offering me a hotel? A one-night pass? Am I supposed to say thank you?" He didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He simply looked at her for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, "I paid $11.4 million because that was what your father owed. Your father would have died anyway, Elena. He was already dead before he drove off that bridge. I didn't set the price. I didn't ask for you as part of it. That was an arrangement your father and I made together, before." She went cold. "Before what?" He looked away. "Before. Just before. Before he killed himself." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Yes. So my father offered me up," she said. The laugh in her throat came all the way out this time, wet and ugly. "My father offered me up to you before he drove his car off a bridge. That's what you're telling me." "That's what I'm telling you. And you said yes." "I said yes." "Why?" He didn't answer. "Why did you say yes?" she said, louder now. And she didn't care that the driver could hear. She didn't care that the men at the door of the house could probably hear. You could have had anyone, Mr. Moreau. You could have had any woman you wanted. You could have taken the money. You could have taken the house. I didn't want the house. Then what did you want? He looked at her then, in the dim light of the car, with the rain coming down on the roof. He looked at her with those tired, pale eyes, and he said, I'll tell you, eventually. Not tonight. That's not an answer. No. You owe me an answer. I know. Then give it to me. Not tonight, Elena. She wanted to scream. She wanted to claw his face. She wanted to throw open the car door and run into the dark and keep running until her lungs gave out. But her body, betrayer that it was, had hit the wall 3 days ago and had kept running on fumes, and now even her anger felt thin, watery, too tired to hold a shape. She sat back against the seat. I'm not going to a hotel, she said. All right. I'm not giving you that. All right. If I'm going to live in your house, Mr. Moreau, I'm going to live in it starting now. I'm not going to let you put it off a night because you're feeling guilty about something. Something flickered across his face. She couldn't tell what. All right, he said a third time. He opened the car door and got out. He came around and opened hers, and he held out his hand, and this time, because her feet hurt in the stupid white shoes and the lace dress was soaked at the hem, and she was so tired, this time she took it. His hand was still cold. It was steady, though. She noticed that. The inside of the house smelled like old wood and something faintly smoky, like a fireplace that had been put out an hour ago. The foyer was huge and dim and had a black and white marble floor, and a staircase rose in the middle of it in a long, slow curve up to a landing with a high window. There was no art on the walls. That struck her. A house like this, a man with money like his, there should have been paintings, there should have been photographs, there should have been something. The walls were bare. The house felt less like a home than like a waiting room. A woman stepped forward out of the shadow of the staircase. She was in her 50s, Elena guessed. Short, wide-shouldered, gray hair pulled back in a knot. She wore a black dress with an apron over it, and her hands were folded in front of her the way people who had worked in service all their lives learned to fold their hands. Mrs. Moreau, the woman said. Elena flinched. My name is Elena. Yes, ma'am. The woman's face didn't change. I'm Berta. I keep the house. I've prepared a room for you on the second floor. If you'll follow me, I'll take you up. A room, Elena said. Yes, ma'am. She glanced at Adrian. He was standing a few feet behind her, his coat still on, rain still dripping from his collar. A separate room, she said. Yes, he said. She was silent. Your things have already been brought from your father's house, Berta said. They're unpacked. If anything's out of place, or if there's anything you need, you tell me directly. Not him. A pause. You tell me. Elena looked at the small, square woman in the apron, and she understood that Berta had said something she was not supposed to say, and she understood also that Berta was going to say it anyway, because Berta had been in this house long enough to know when to bend a rule. Thank you, Berta, Elena said. This way, ma'am. The room was on the second floor at the end of a long hall lined with closed doors. It was large, larger than her bedroom at her father's house. There was a 4-poster bed, a small sitting area by a window, a fireplace with a fire already going, and a door that led to a private bathroom with a tub the size of a small car. Her suitcases, both of them, the ones she had packed 3 days ago and shoved in the back of her closet in case she ever got the nerve to run, were sitting on a rack at the foot of the bed. They were empty. Someone had unpacked them. Someone had put her clothes in the dresser, her books on the little shelf by the window, her mother's jewelry box on the nightstand. Elena stood in the middle of the room and felt her stomach turn. Who? She said. I did, ma'am. Berta was still at the door. It was me. I took care of it myself. Nobody else touched anything. Was there your mother's box? Berta nodded once. I knew what it was. I didn't open it. I put it on the table by the bed. Elena let out a breath. Thank you. There's a bath drawn if you want one, Berta said. Hot, and there's a tray in the sitting room. Soup and bread, nothing heavy. You haven't eaten in 3 days, ma'am. Don't tell me you have. How do you know that? Because I've seen a lot of women come through hard weeks, Berta said. And I know what 3 days without eating looks like. Elena didn't know what to say to that. He won't come up here, Berta added, more quietly. Not tonight. Not unless you ask for him. That's the rule. Whose rule? Berta looked at her for a long moment. His, she said. Then she closed the door and left Elena alone. Elena did not take the bath. She ate the soup because Berta was right and her body was screaming for it, and she tore half the loaf of bread apart with her hands because she couldn't wait to slice it, and afterward she sat on the edge of the four-poster bed in her borrowed lace dress and she cried again. Quietly this time. Not like in the morning, just water running down her face like something had sprung a leak. She fell asleep in the dress. She woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of a door closing. Not her door. A door somewhere in the hall, distant, firm. She lay very still, staring up at the dark ceiling, and she listened to the house breathe around her. There was wind outside, rain on the slate roof, and somewhere, far off, the faint single note of a piano. One key, struck once, then silence. She thought, he's awake. She thought, he's awake and he's down there, and he is not going to come up here. She thought, what kind of man buys a woman and then sends her a dress that fits her and sets a rule that he won't come upstairs? She did not have an answer. She got out of bed. She peeled off the lace dress because she couldn't stand the feeling of it against her skin another second, and she dropped it in a heap on the floor, and she found a nightgown in the dresser. Her nightgown, her old one, the blue one her mother had given her the Christmas before she died, and she put it on. And then she went to the door of her room, and she locked it. And then she went to the window, and she locked that too. And then she got back in the bed, and she did not sleep again until morning. The rules came with breakfast. She came downstairs at 9. She had no idea what time people in this house ate. Nobody had told her, and she had spent an hour staring at the ceiling before she'd finally forced herself to get up. And she found Berta in the dining room, setting out a place for one. He's already eaten, ma'am. Oh. He eats at 6. He works early. All right. He left this for you. Berta held out a single folded sheet of cream-colored paper. Elena took it. It was a list, typed, neat, on heavy stationery. 5 lines. Do not leave the estate without me. Do not open the gate for anyone. Do not answer the house phones. Do not go past the tree line behind the south lawn. Do not speak to the men at the gate. Elena read it twice. These are the rules, she said. Yes, ma'am. These are the rules he has for me. Yes, ma'am. For how long? Berta hesitated. Ma'am, I don't... You can tell me, Berta. For as long as it takes, ma'am. That's what he said when he told me. For as long as it takes. Takes what? Berta set down the plate she was holding. Ma'am, she said, if I tell you something, will you not tell him I said it? Yes. You promise me. I promise you, Berta. Berta took a breath. 3 years ago, she said, a man tried to get into this house. He came over the south wall at 2 a.m. He had a rifle and a photograph in his pocket, and he was not here for Mr. Moreau. He was here for someone else. A woman, ma'am, a cousin of Mr. Moreau's who lived here for a time. She was 22 years old. Elena's throat went dry. Berta, they caught him before he got in the house. She was upstairs. She didn't know anything about it until the morning. What happened to the man? Berta's eyes didn't leave hers. He was a warning, ma'am, for someone else. A warning about something Mr. Moreau had done. And the warning was delivered by coming here, to this house, for her, who had nothing to do with any of it. Do you understand? Yes, that's why the rules, Berta said quietly. That's why the gate. That's why he doesn't want you past the tree line. That's why the men outside. It's not because he wants to keep you in, ma'am. It's because he's afraid of what might get through. Elena looked down at the sheet of cream paper in her hand. Where is she now? She asked. The cousin. Berta's face softened, and then it hardened again, all in the space of a second. She moved home to Spain, ma'am. She got married. She had a little boy last year. She's safe, but I don't think she'll ever come back here. And I think Mr. Moreau... Berta stopped. She pressed her lips together. Say it, Berta. I think he's been alone in this house since she left, ma'am. Truly alone. I think that's part of why... She stopped again. Why what? Elena said. Why, he's a bit strange about you being here, ma'am, that's all. Elena folded the sheet of cream paper very slowly and set it beside her plate. Thank you, Berta. You're welcome, ma'am. Please call me Elena. Berta looked at her for a long moment, and then she did something Elena hadn't seen anyone in this house do yet. She almost smiled. Elena, she said. The first week, she didn't see him. That was the strangest part. She lived in his house. She ate off his plates. She walked on his floors, and she did not see her husband. He left before she woke up. He came home after she had gone to bed. Twice she heard him in the hall outside her room. His footsteps were distinct, slower than the other men's, and he paused, always, at her door, for a count of 3, before going on. But he did not knock. He did not speak. He kept his rule. She started to hate him for it. That surprised her. She had expected to be grateful. She had expected every night to lock her door and feel relief when he did not try it. And the first 2 nights, that was what she felt. But by the 4th night, something had soured in her chest. He had paid a fortune for her. He had sent a car. He had dressed her in a stranger's lace. He had married her in an empty church. And now he was, what, avoiding her? Letting her rattle around in his enormous cold house like a ghost? Sending her a list of rules on cream paper? On the 7th night, she came down to the kitchen at midnight because she couldn't sleep, and she found him standing at the counter. He was in a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no jacket. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, and when he turned and saw her in the doorway in her blue nightgown and bare feet, the phone dropped out of his hand onto the counter. He caught it before it fell off the edge. Elena. Mr. Moreau. I thought you were asleep. I couldn't sleep. Do you want... Is there... I came for water. Right. He set down the coffee. There are glasses in... Let me... And she watched with a strange, bitter amusement as this man who ran the waterfront, this man whose name emptied rooms, opened 3 cabinets before he found a glass, and then filled it at the sink and brought it to her at the kitchen island and set it down in front of her like he was handing off a loaded gun. She sat down on one of the stools. He stood on the other side of the island. You've been avoiding me, she said. Yes. It was the first thing she had expected him to lie about, and he didn't. Why? Because I don't know how to be around you without making it worse. Making what worse? He was quiet. Mr. Moreau. Adrian. Mr. Moreau. What are you making worse? He looked at her across the island. In the dim kitchen light, his face was softer than she had seen it, less carved, more tired. Your hatred of me, he said. She didn't answer right away. She took a sip of the water. Don't flatter yourself, she said. No? I don't hate you, Mr. Moreau. I don't know you well enough to hate you. That's fair. I'm furious with you. That's also fair. And I'm tired of walking around your house like a tenant. He set his hands on the counter. What do you want, Elena? I want to know why. Why what? Why me? He closed his eyes. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His hands, flat on the counter, flexed and tightened and flexed again. And when he opened his eyes, she saw what she had seen in the car on the way here. That old hunger, that thing that was not about her body, that frightening thing. Do you remember, he said slowly, a summer fundraiser, 8 years ago, at the Halston Museum? She stared at him. The cancer research one? Yes. I was there, briefly. Your mother was very sick then. Yes. How do you know that? He didn't answer that. You gave a speech, he said. I didn't give a... You did. Not at the podium. In a side room. There was a little boy. He was 6, 7 years old. He was there because his mother was being treated at the hospital the fundraiser was for. He had gotten separated from his grandmother, and he was sitting on a bench in a hallway, crying. And you saw him, and you sat down next to him on the bench, and you asked him what his favorite animal was. Elena's throat had gone completely dry. He said, a sea turtle. You asked him to tell you about sea turtles. And he told you, Elena. You let a 7-year-old child tell you about sea turtles for 20 minutes. And you listened. You listened to him. And by the time his grandmother came and found him, he had stopped crying, and he had decided that he was going to be a marine biologist when he grew up. She couldn't breathe. "How?" she said. "How do you know? I never told anyone." "Because," Adrian said, "I was at the other end of that hallway. I saw you. I didn't know who you were. I watched a young woman I had never seen before sit down on a bench and give a crying child 20 minutes of her life, and not do it for show, and not know anyone was watching, and I thought—" He stopped. "Mr. Moreau. Adrian. Adrian." Her voice cracked. "You thought what? I thought I had never seen anything like that," he said. "Not in my life, not in the life I lived. And I asked somebody later who you were. And when they told me your last name, I laughed, because your father was already drowning in debt to 3 banks and 2 men I knew. And I thought—" "Of course," Elena whispered. "Of course you did." "No." He shook his head sharply. "No, you don't understand. I didn't go near him. I stayed away from your father for 6 years, Elena. 6 years. Because I didn't want anything between you and me to be—" He stopped. He looked down at his hands. "When he finally came to me 2 years ago," he said quietly, "when he finally walked into my office because the banks had cut him off and he had nowhere else to go. When that happened, I told him no. The first time he asked me, I turned him down. I knew what I was, and I knew what taking his debt would make me, and I said no. Then what happened? He came back, and you said yes. I said yes." She stared at him, the blue nightgown, the midnight kitchen, the ring on her finger, the rain against the window. "Why?" she said. "Why finally yes?" Adrian was silent for a very long time. "Because he asked me to take care of you," he said, "if something happened to him. He said he was sick. He wasn't. He lied to me. He knew what he was going to do, but he said he was sick, and he said you would have nothing when he was gone, and he asked me to make sure you would be all right. And I—" His voice caught. "And I said I would. I didn't say anything about marriage. I didn't say anything about the debt. I said I would make sure you would be all right. And then he went and drove off the bridge, Elena, and he left a letter in my office saying that if I wanted the debt wiped clean, if I wanted to honor our agreement, then I would take the only thing he had left. Me. You. And you did. And I did." She couldn't speak. "I could have burned the letter," Adrian said. His voice was very low now. "I could have. I thought about it. For 11 days I thought about it. I could have sent you the money. I had plenty of it. I could have paid off every creditor who was going to come after the house and the business, and I could have walked away and you would have had your life back and you would have hated a memory instead of a man. I could have done that." "Why didn't you?" He looked up. "Because I am not a good man, Elena," he said. "I am not a kind man. I am not the man who sat on that bench with that little boy, and I am never going to be. But I saw you that one time, and I thought if I could have one thing in my life that was not this." He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, at the house, at everything. "I knew I would be doing a terrible thing," he said. I'm aware every minute of every day. But I did it anyway." Elena looked at him, at his hands on the counter, at his tired face, at the ring on his left hand that matched the one on hers. She thought she was going to cry. She thought she was going to scream. She thought she was going to pick up the water glass and throw it at his head. What she did instead was take a breath and say, very quietly, "That's the worst love story I've ever heard." Adrian let out a sound that was not quite a laugh. "I know. I'm not forgiving you. I wouldn't want you to. I don't know what to do with any of this. I know." She stood up from the stool. Her legs were not entirely steady. "I'm going back to bed." "All right." At the door of the kitchen, she stopped. She didn't turn around. "Adrian." "Yes." "The next time you want to avoid me for a week," she said, "don't. I'd rather hate you in person." She didn't wait for an answer. She walked back up the long, curving staircase in her bare feet, and she went to her room, and she locked the door. She got back in the bed. She lay there in the dark, listening to the rain. And she realized, with a slow and terrible honesty, that when she had walked out of that kitchen, she had not locked the door of her room because she was afraid of him. She had locked it because she was afraid of herself. The days after that shifted, though Elena couldn't have named how at first. She started seeing him. Not dramatically. He didn't suddenly appear for every meal, didn't stand in her doorway, didn't corner her in hallways. He simply stopped hiding. Breakfast, sometimes. A nod in the library. A low conversation with Berta in the kitchen that trailed off when Elena walked in, that he did not pick back up, that he let die because he could see on Elena's face that she did not want to be talked around. He asked her, one morning, what she used to do for a living. She told him, community college, drawing and intro painting. 2 classes a semester, plus summer workshops for teenagers who didn't want to be there. He listened. Really listened, which was something she had forgotten people could do. And then he asked if she still drew, and she said no. He didn't push. 3 days later, there was a wooden box on the sitting room table outside her bedroom. Inside were supplies. Good ones. Charcoal, graphite, 3 sketchbooks of different weights, a set of watercolor pans in a tin. Brushes that she could tell by the ferrules had not been bought at a craft store. There was no note. She didn't ask Berta about it. She already knew. She did not touch the box for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she took out a sketchbook and a pencil, and she sat in the window of her room and she drew the fountain in the front drive. Badly. Her hand had forgotten. But she sat there for 40 minutes, and when she was done, her chest felt, for the first time since her father had died, like it was made of something other than wet cement. She closed the sketchbook and stared at it for a long time. Then she got up, walked down the curving staircase, and found Adrian in his study, a room she had not entered before. He was on the phone. He looked up when she came in, and he said something short in a language she didn't speak, and he hung up. Elena? Thank you for the box. He inclined his head very slightly. You're welcome. She stood in the doorway. She didn't come in. She didn't sit down. She wasn't ready for that. But she held on to the door frame and she looked at him across the room and she said, I'm not saying I forgive you. I know. I'm saying thank you for the box. I understand. She nodded once, turned around, and walked back up the stairs. And she did not know. She honestly did not know. Whether what she was feeling, climbing those stairs with the sound of her own footsteps on the marble, was something opening in her chest or something closing. She only knew that for the first time since she had walked down that aisle, she was not entirely sure she wanted to run. And that was a thing she would have to sit with. For a long time, probably. In his house, with his ring, in the dark, she sat with it for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of small, careful days. She drew in the mornings. She ate breakfast alone sometimes and with him sometimes. And when they ate together, they talked about nothing, which was, she began to realize, a thing she had not done with another human being since her mother died. Talking about nothing. Weather. A book he was reading. The fact that Berta had gotten into a fight with the gardener about the hydrangeas and was not speaking to him. Small, stupid, human things. He did not ask her about her father. He did not ask her about the wedding. He did not ever refer to himself as her husband. And he did not ever touch her. That was what she noticed most. He did not touch her. He did not brush her shoulder as he passed. He did not take her elbow at the top of a step. Once at dinner, she had reached for the salt at the same time he had, and their hands had almost met, and he had pulled his back so fast it was almost funny. It wasn't funny. She thought about it that night, lying in bed, and she realized that a man who had paid $11.4 million for a wife was deliberately not touching her, and she did not know what to do with that information. It sat in her chest like a stone that kept changing weight. On the 22nd day, she asked him if she could leave the estate. She had been expecting a no. She had in fact been preparing for a fight about it. She had spent the previous night writing out, in her head, a whole speech about how she couldn't live like this, how she needed air, how she wasn't a prisoner, how he had to understand. And she came down to breakfast with her jaw set, and she said, I want to go into the city today. And Adrian, without looking up from his paper, said, Where do you want to go? What? Where do you want to go, Elena? In the city. I have a list. There's a hardware store on Vine Street that sells the paper I like. And there's a place in Little Arden that does lunch. And I want to... All right. I'll drive you. You will? Yes. I don't want to go with you, Adrian. He looked up then. He folded the paper. His face did not change exactly, but something behind it did. Elena, I want to go by myself. That's not going to happen. Why? He set the paper down. Because 3 weeks ago, somebody put a word out on you, Elena. She stared at him. Put a word? Your name, in certain rooms, attached to mine. His voice was very even. That's how it works. When I married you, I drew a line around you. And there are men in this city, men I have made deals with, men I have broken deals with, who have been looking for a line of mine to cross for a long time. That line, right now, is you. I didn't want to tell you that. I didn't think there was any point in telling you that until you decided you wanted to leave the house. Now you have. So I'm telling you. But she sat down slowly. And if I go with you? If you go with me, there are 4 men in 2 cars, and you can buy your paper at the hardware store, and you can eat lunch in Little Arden, and you can go anywhere you want. And if I go by myself, then I have to tell you no. And I don't want to tell you no, Elena. I hate telling you no. Please don't make me. She sat with that for a long moment. The hardware store first, she said. His shoulders went down a fraction. It was the first time she had seen him relax since she'd walked into the dining room. The hardware store first, he said. The car ride into the city was the longest they had spent together in one space since the night of the wedding. He drove himself, which surprised her. She had assumed there would be a driver. She had assumed he didn't do his own driving. But he got behind the wheel of a silver car she hadn't seen before, and he drove. And the 2 men in the second car followed at a polite distance. And Adrian didn't turn on the radio and didn't try to make conversation and just drove. She watched his hands on the wheel. He had good hands. They were not the hands of a man who had been born into this life. They had old scars on the knuckles, one of them shiny and pale across the back of his right thumb, and she found herself wanting to ask what that one was from, and she didn't ask. At the hardware store, he stood outside. You can come in. No. Why? Because you don't want me to. She didn't know what to say to that. She went inside. She took her time. She picked out the paper she wanted and 2 bottles of ink and a small brush she didn't need. And when she came out 20 minutes later, he was leaning against the car in the rain with his hands in his coat pockets, and he had not checked his watch, and he had not gone to sit inside. He straightened when he saw her and opened the door and took the bag from her and put it in the back seat. Little Arden? Little Arden. Little Arden was a small, old neighborhood at the east end of the city. 3 blocks of narrow streets with cafes and bookstores and a church at the end with a bell that rang on the hour. Elena's mother had brought her here when she was a little girl. They had eaten pastries at a place on the corner of Argent and Ninth, and her mother had let her pick out a postcard at every store, and at the end of the day they had sat on the steps of the church and counted pigeons. Elena had not been back since her mother died. She didn't tell him that. They ate at a small place called Mariel's, tucked between a used bookshop and a fabric store. There were 6 tables. There was a young woman behind the counter who greeted Adrian by name and who gave Elena a long, open look before looking away. Elena sat across from him in a booth by the window, and she ate a bowl of soup, and she watched the rain come down on the street outside. And the 2 men from the second car sat in their car across the street and pretended to read a newspaper. Did you come here with her? Elena said. He looked up. Who? Your cousin, the one who lived with you. His jaw moved. No, he said. Elise didn't like this neighborhood. How did she end up with you? He set down his spoon. Elena, you don't have to tell me. I'll tell you, he said. It's not a secret. Her mother, my aunt, died when she was 16. Her father wasn't in the picture. I was the only family she had left, and I was in a position to take care of her. So I did. She came here at 17 and she left at 22. And the man with the rifle, he went very still. Berta told you. Don't be angry with her. I'm not angry with her. He let out a slow breath. I wasn't sure when that conversation was going to happen. I thought I'd be the one to have it. It's all right. It's not all right, Elena. It's a little bit all right. He looked at her across the booth, and for a moment she thought she had pushed too far. And then, for the first time since she had known him, Adrian Moreau smiled. Not a full smile. Barely a smile. The corner of his mouth moved, but it was a thing, and she caught it, and she filed it away. Then his phone rang. He pulled it out of his coat and looked at the screen, and his face changed. He stood up before he even answered. Wait here, he said. Don't move. Adrian, please. He stepped out of the restaurant. Elena watched him through the window. He stood under the awning in the rain, phone to his ear, and he did not pace and he did not gesture, but his shoulders were very straight and very still, which she had already learned was the thing to watch for. He spoke for maybe 90 seconds. Then he put the phone away and came back in and sat down across from her. We need to go. What happened? Nothing. Something I need to handle. Adrian? Elena, please. Not here. She looked at him. She looked at the set of his jaw. And she stood up without finishing her soup, and she put on her coat, and she walked out of the restaurant. They were halfway to the car when the man stopped them. He came out of an alley between the bookstore and the fabric shop. He was maybe 40, gaunt, wearing a dark coat too big for him. He wasn't armed. Elena's eye went to his hands first. She had learned to do that in 3 weeks. And he wasn't moving fast. He was almost staggering. He had something in his arms. Adrian's men moved before Elena could think. Both of them. One of them was suddenly between her and the man, a hand on her shoulder, pushing her firmly back toward the car. The other had his coat pulled back and his hand inside it. Please, the man said. His voice cracked. Please, Mr. Moreau, I just need... Stop walking, said one of the men. The gaunt man stopped. He was shaking. Elena could see that now, could see it even from behind the shoulder of the man in front of her. Mr. Moreau, the gaunt man said, you know me. You know me. I'm Thomas Kerr. I used to work the South Dock for Benny. Do you remember? Mr. Moreau, do you remember? Adrian had stopped walking. His hand was not on his own coat. He had not drawn anything. He stood perfectly still in the middle of the sidewalk in the rain, and he looked at the gaunt man with an expression Elena could not read. I remember you, Thomas. It's my daughter, Mr. Moreau. It's my daughter. She's 7. She's got the doctors, there's a surgery. They can do a surgery, but it's $60,000, Mr. Moreau, and I got no one. I got nothing. My wife, she left 2 years ago. I've been trying to get the money every way I know how, and I heard you were in the city today, and He opened his arms. What he was holding wasn't a bomb and wasn't a gun. It was a photograph. A framed photograph of a little girl with a gap between her front teeth, sitting on a man's shoulders, squinting into the sun. She's a good kid, Mr. Moreau. The man in front of Elena had not lowered his hand. She could feel the tension coming off him like heat. Back up, Thomas, the man said. Right now. I'm not gonna... Back up. The gaunt man's face crumpled. He didn't back up. He didn't move. He stood there in the rain with a photograph of his daughter in his hands, and he looked past the security man at Adrian, and he said, in a voice that was barely holding together, Mr. Moreau, please, I will work it off. I will do anything. I will... Whatever you need. Whatever you... He's not going to kill you, Thomas. Everyone turned. Elena had stepped out from behind the security man. She hadn't thought about it. Her feet had moved. She was standing in the middle of the sidewalk in the rain with her shopping bag in one hand, and she had said the words, and she didn't know whose mouth they had come out of, but it was definitely hers. Elena. Adrian's voice was very low. Get in the car. Is he? Get in the car, Elena. Is he going to kill him, Adrian? Adrian looked at her. The rain was coming down harder now. It had soaked into her hair, was running down the sides of her face. The 2 security men had gone completely still. The gaunt man, Thomas, was staring at her like she was a hallucination. No, Adrian said after a long moment. No, I'm not going to kill him. Then tell your men to put their hands down. He didn't say anything. Adrian, tell them. Michael, Roger, hands down. The security men's hands dropped from their coats. Elena walked past them. She walked right past Adrian. She walked up to the gaunt man standing in the rain with a photograph of his daughter, and she looked at the picture, really looked, at the gap-toothed little girl on her father's shoulders in the sun. And she looked at Thomas Kerr, and she saw his face up close, and she saw that he was a man who had not slept in a long time and had not eaten enough, and had, very probably, been about to do something much worse than come up to a crime lord on the street and beg. What's her name? Elena said. Thomas's lips moved. No sound came out. "What's her name?" she said again. "Lily." "Lily. All right, Lily. Is she at the hospital right now, Thomas?" She's at county, in the pediatric floor." "All right." Elena turned. She looked at Adrian. Her voice was completely steady, which surprised her because nothing else about her was. "Adrian?" He was watching her. "Give him the money." "Elena, give him the money." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. Elena, you don't understand what this is. This man worked for a crew I broke apart 2 years ago. This man was on the South Dock when I made certain choices. I'm not the person he should be asking, and I can't just what? Did you kill his boss?" Adrian stopped. "What?" "Benny," he said. "Benny. Did you kill Benny?" A long pause. "Yes," Adrian said. "Then you owe him." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works." The street had gone quiet. The two security men were not looking at Adrian anymore. They were looking at her. Thomas Kerr was crying without sound, tears running down his face in the rain, the photograph shaking in his hands. Adrian looked at her for a long time, and then he did something Elena would remember for a very long time afterward, longer than almost anything else that happened to her that year. He took his coat off. He walked across the sidewalk. He put his coat around Thomas Kerr's shoulders because the man was shaking so hard he was about to fall down, and he took the photograph out of Thomas's hands, very gently, and he handed it to one of the security men to hold, and he took Thomas by the elbow, and he walked him to the second car. "Michael, take him to county, find out what the surgery is, who the surgeon is, what it costs, pay in full. And I mean all of it, Michael, not just the surgery, the rehab, the follow-ups, everything." "Sir." "And call the school, whichever school it is, pay the tuition through senior year." "Sir." Adrian turned back to Thomas. "You owe me nothing, Thomas." "Mr. Moreau, nothing. Do you hear me?" Thomas Kerr's knees gave out. The security man caught him. They got him into the back of the car. Adrian stood on the sidewalk and watched the car pull away. Then he turned around. Elena was still standing where he had left her. He walked over to her. The rain was streaming down his face now. His shirt was soaked through where the coat had been. "Get in the car," he said quietly. She got in the car. He drove. He did not speak for 10 minutes. On the highway out of the city, with the rain drumming on the roof and the windshield wipers working hard, he finally said, without looking at her, "You can never do that again." "Do what?" "Step in front of a man whose hands I can't see." "Adrian, ever, Elena, not ever. Do you understand me?" His voice was shaking. She had never heard his voice shake before. "I understand," she said. "Good." He gripped the wheel. "I understand," she said again, "but I'd do it again." "Jesus Christ, Elena." "I would, Adrian, if there's another man with a photograph of his daughter. I would do it every single time." He didn't answer. They drove the rest of the way in silence. That night she did not lock her door. She didn't make a decision about it. She didn't stand at the door and deliberate. She simply walked past it, on her way to the bed, and she did not turn the lock, and she got under the covers and closed her eyes and lay there in the dark. He did not come up. She hadn't expected him to. But the next morning, when she came down to breakfast, he was already in the dining room. He was sitting in the chair he always sat in, but he was looking at the window instead of his paper. The paper was folded, untouched, next to his coffee. The coffee was cold. "You didn't sleep," she said. "No." "Neither did I." "I gathered." She sat down. "What happened with Lily Kerr?" "Lily." Adrian took a breath. "She went in for the surgery at 4 this morning. It's a 7-hour procedure. I have someone there. They'll call me when it's done." "All right." "She has about an 80% chance, her surgeon says. If it goes well, she's home in 6 weeks. If it doesn't, it'll go well." He looked at her then. "You don't know that." "I know." "Elena." "I know, Adrian." He didn't argue. He drank his cold coffee. He set the cup down. He looked at the window again. "You put me in a position yesterday," he said. "I know. Those men, Michael, Roger, they work for me, And they will do what I say, but what you did yesterday is the kind of thing that, Adrian, the kind of thing that people notice, Elena. People who watch me. People who watch this house. They will have heard about yesterday by now. They will know that there is a woman who walked up to a desperate man in front of me and told me to give him money, and that I did. And they will know something about me now that they did not know yesterday. That you have a weakness. He looked at her. Yes. And the weakness is me. Yes. She sat back in her chair. I'm sorry, Adrian. Don't be sorry. I put her in a position too. Lily, if somebody wanted to, nobody is going to touch Lily Kerr. I'll see to that. That's not what I'm telling you, Elena. I'm not telling you that you did the wrong thing. I'm telling you, he stopped. I'm telling you I don't know how to keep you safe anymore. I don't know how to keep you safe when you are the person you are. And his voice broke. I don't want you to be anyone else, he said. She reached across the table. She did it without thinking, exactly the way she had stepped in front of Thomas Kerr the day before. Her hand went across the breakfast dishes, and she put it on top of his, where it rested flat on the tablecloth, and she held it. His hand was cold. It was always cold. Adrian? Don't. Adrian, look at me. He looked at her. I'm not going anywhere, she said. He closed his eyes. They did not move for a long time. His hand under hers, her hand on his, the cold coffee, the folded paper, the rain outside that had not let up in 3 days. She was still holding his hand when the window exploded. Afterward, she would have a hard time putting the order of things in a line. The glass came first, that she remembered, the sound of it, which was not a shatter but a cough, a spray, like something spitting. And then the tablecloth was moving, plates were sliding, Adrian was on top of her, she was on the floor, and he was shouting something she couldn't hear because her ears were ringing. Gunfire. Outside. She understood that somewhere around the 10th second, there were men outside the house with guns, and they were shooting at the house, and there was glass in her hair, and Adrian was on top of her on the dining room floor with one hand pressed hard against the back of her head, and the other arm braced over her like a roof. Down, down, don't move. Adrian, don't move, Elena. More gunfire, not close. Farther out, from the direction of the front gate. Berta! Berta's in the cellar. She's all right. How do you... She's all right, Elena. Men were running in the house now. She heard boots, voices. Somebody shouting in that language she didn't know. Adrian's hand on the back of her head did not move. She could feel his heart pounding through his shirt. He was almost pressed against her spine. And she could feel his breath, which was coming fast but not ragged, controlled, like a man who had been here before and knew exactly how to breathe through it. Adrian. Yes. Are they going to come in? No. How do you know? Because they never do. The gunfire stopped. It didn't taper off. It stopped. One long exchange and then silence, which was somehow much worse. Elena lay on her cheek on the dining room floor with glass in her hair and her husband on top of her and listened to the silence. A voice called from the hall. Clear, boss. How many? 4. 2 across the wall, 2 in the tree line, all 4 down. Ours? Roger took one in the shoulder. He's all right. Stitches. Good. Adrian let out a breath. Then he slowly, carefully, lifted himself off her. He crouched beside her. He started checking her. Not her face, not her eyes, her arms, her hands, her neck. He lifted a hand and picked something out of her hair, a piece of glass the size of a dime, and set it aside like it was nothing, and kept going. Are you hurt? No. Elena, are you hurt anywhere? I'm not hurt, Adrian. Any pain? Anywhere? At all? No. He closed his eyes. He pressed his forehead against her forehead for exactly 1 second, the only time in all the weeks she had known him that he had ever touched her like that. And then he sat back on his heels and turned toward the hall, and his face went in the space of a breath from the man who had checked her for glass to something else entirely. Get the cars. A man in the doorway. Sir? And bring me Denis. Sir? He was one of the 4. He's alive? He's alive. We have him in the garage. Adrian stood. He looked down at Elena once, a long look, a look she would not have been able to describe afterward, a look that did not belong on the face of a man who had taken $11.4 million worth of her father's debt and turned her into his wife. "Stay here," he said. "Adrian? Stay, Elena, stay. Berta will be up in 5 minutes. Don't leave this floor until she comes for you." He walked out of the dining room. He did not come back for 6 hours. When he did come back, it was dark. She was in the library. She had moved there after Berta had come up. She had not been able to sit still. She had moved from the dining room to the kitchen, to the hall, to the library, trailing Berta, who had gone around the house pulling curtains and locking things. And she had ended up on the library couch with a blanket over her legs and a cup of tea she hadn't drunk. He stood in the doorway. He looked different, not injured. He had changed his shirt. But the thing that had been in his face in the dining room, the thing she had seen for 1 second when he had told them to bring him Denis, that thing was still there. It had settled into his jaw and his eyes and even his hands. He was not the man who had driven her into the city. He was not the man who had sat on the edge of her bed of the kitchen counter at midnight and told her about a little boy on a bench. He was the other man, the one she had been told about. "Elena, I'm all right." "I know." He came into the room. He sat down in the armchair across from her. He did not sit close. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. "Who were they?" she said. "Men who work for a man named Wilder." "Wilder? Don't worry about Wilder. Is he going to send more men?" "No." "How do you know?" "Because I spent 6 hours with the one we caught alive," Adrian said. "And I am going to spend tomorrow with Wilder himself. You are not going to see me for a day or two, Elena. Berta will be with you. The house will be secure. When I come back, this will be over." She looked at him. "Are you going to kill him?" A pause. "Yes." "Adrian, don't ask me to not do it, Elena. I wasn't going to ask you that." He looked up. "What were you going to ask me?" She set the tea down. "I was going to ask you to come back." He didn't answer. "I was going to ask you," she said, "to please come back, that's all. That's the whole thing. I don't care who he is. I don't care what he did. I don't care what you do to him. I don't even care anymore if you tell me about it. I just want you to come back to this house. Do you understand me?" He had gone very still. "Elena, do you understand me, Adrian?" "I understand you." "Good." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Go." He stood up. At the door he stopped. He did not turn around. He said, very quietly, "I didn't know this was going to happen, Elena. I want you to know that. I've been trying it for 3 weeks. I've been trying to figure out how to keep this life away from you. And I couldn't. I couldn't even give you a month of it." "Adrian." "Yes." "Shut up and come back." For a second she thought he was going to turn around, and she didn't know what she would do if he did. And then he didn't. He walked out. She heard the front door open and close. She heard a car start in the drive, and then another one. She heard them pull away through the gate. She sat on the library couch in the dark for a long time. And sometime after midnight, with the house quiet and the rain finally slowing to a drip on the window, she understood a thing about herself that she had been refusing to understand for 3 weeks. She was not afraid of him coming back. She was afraid of him not coming back. That was different. That was a different thing entirely. That was not the fear of a woman who had been bought and put in a cage. That was the fear of a woman who had started, without meaning to, without even wanting to, without knowing when exactly it had happened, to need the man who had bought her. She put her face in her hands. "Oh no," she said, out loud, to the empty room. "Oh, no." Her own voice sounded very small, and the house, around her, did not answer. He was gone for 3 days. 3 days of a house that had turned into something else. The gardener did not come. The deliveries stopped. The men at the gate doubled. Elena counted 6 now, where there had been 2, and they did not stand at the gate anymore. They walked it, a slow rotation that she could see from her window at any hour. Berta had moved a cot into the hallway outside Elena's bedroom. She wouldn't talk about it. When Elena had asked her why, Berta had said, "Because that's where I'm sleeping, ma'am." And that had been the end of the conversation. Elena didn't sleep much either. She drew. That was what she did. When she couldn't sleep, when she couldn't read, when she couldn't sit still. She sat in the library with her sketchbook on her knees and she drew. Not the fountain this time, not the view from the window. She drew his hands, the hands on the steering wheel, the hands on the breakfast table, the hand she had held for that 1 second before the glass had come in. She drew them over and over, in different lights, in different positions, until the page was a dark smear of charcoal and her own fingers were black up to the second knuckle. She hated that she was drawing his hands. She drew them anyway. On the second day, Berta came into the library at dusk and sat down on the couch across from her without asking. This was new. Berta did not, as a rule, sit. Berta stood in doorways and in kitchens and beside tables, and if she came into a room, it was to bring something or take something, and then she left. She had never, in all the weeks Elena had lived in this house, sat down across from her. Elena closed the sketchbook. Berta. Ma'am? What's wrong? Berta looked at her. She had a dish towel in her lap, and her hands were working it between her fingers, slow, thoughtful, the way other people might work a rosary. He called, she said. Elena sat up straight. He called, not for me, for the house, for the men. He called Michael. I was standing in the kitchen when the call came in, ma'am, and Michael stepped out to take it, and when he came back, he did not look at me. That's what I want to tell you. He did not look at me. Elena's stomach tightened. Berta, He's alive, ma'am. If he were not alive, Michael would have told me before he told anyone, and he would have woken you, and we would not be having this conversation. He is alive, but something is what? Berta kept twisting the dish towel. In all the years I have worked in this house, she said, I have seen him come back from things. Bad things, ma'am. Things I don't tell you about, and things I won't tell you about. And he comes back, quiet. That is his word for it. That is how he comes home. He is quiet, and he washes, and he sleeps for a day, and he gets up, and he eats, and he goes on. That is what he does. All right. He has been gone 3 days, ma'am, and Michael will not tell me when he is coming back. And Michael always tells me. Elena felt cold. Berta. Yes. Is he hurt? I don't know, ma'am. Is he in trouble? I don't know. Is he? Ma'am, I don't know. I am sorry. I thought you should know what I know, which is that I don't know, and that is not normal. Elena sat very still. Berta, she said, do you think he's not coming back? Berta looked up from the dish towel. No, ma'am, she said. I think he's coming back. I think he will walk through that door. I am telling you this because when he walks through that door, ma'am, I want you to be ready. Because whoever walks through that door in a day or 2 days or 3 days, that man is going to be hurting, not in his body, ma'am, deeper. And he will not know how to let anyone near him. And he has no one in this house who he will let near him, except you. Elena's throat closed. Berta. I've said my piece, ma'am. Berta stood up. She folded the dish towel neatly and set it on the arm of the couch, and she looked at Elena for one long moment, and then she walked out of the library. And Elena sat there with the sketchbook on her knees in the dim light of a single lamp, and she did not draw any more that night. She sat, and she looked at the door, and she waited. He came home on the 4th day. She was in the kitchen when she heard the car. It was late afternoon, cold, a thin winter light coming in through the windows. She had been peeling potatoes with Berta, not because Berta had asked, but because she had needed something to do with her hands that wasn't drawing and wasn't locking doors. And she heard the tires on the gravel in the drive, and she set the knife down. She didn't run. That was a thing she noticed later, that she was proud of later. She did not run. She rinsed her hands under the tap, she dried them on a towel, and she walked, at a regular walking pace, out of the kitchen and down the long hall and into the foyer. Berta stayed in the kitchen. Berta understood. The front door opened. Michael came in first. He was the tallest of the men, the one who had been with them in the city, the one Adrian had sent with Thomas Kerr. He saw her in the foyer and stopped. He looked at her, a quick flicker of something, relief, maybe, or apology, she couldn't tell, and then he stepped aside. Adrian came in behind him, and Elena understood, in 1 second of looking at him, exactly what Berta had meant. He was not hurt, not visibly. His face was not bruised, His hands were at his sides, and they were not bandaged. His clothes were new. He had changed somewhere before coming home, which was a thing Elena filed away without thinking about what it meant, what it must have meant. And his hair was damp at the temples, like he had washed his face. He looked fine. He did not look fine. He looked like a man who had left something somewhere and did not know how to ask for it back. His mouth was set in a way she had never seen it set before, a tight compressed line, and his eyes, when they found hers, went through her for half a second before they landed. Elena. Adrian. You're all right. It wasn't a question. He said it flatly, to himself, like he was confirming something. I'm all right. Good. He did not take off his coat. He stood in the foyer with his coat still on, 10 feet away from her, and she understood with a quick and certain clarity that if she did nothing, he was going to turn around and walk into his study and close the door and not come out for 12 hours. He was going to be quiet. That was what he was going to do. Berta was right. Adrian? Yes. Come into the kitchen. I'm not hungry, Elena. I didn't ask if you were hungry. He looked at her. Michael, who had been standing off to the side, very carefully did not look at either of them. He stepped back through the front door and closed it quietly behind him. Come into the kitchen, she said again. He came into the kitchen. Berta was not there. Berta had gone, Elena realized, probably upstairs, probably to sit on her cot and pretend to be asleep. The potatoes were on the cutting board, half peeled. A pot of water was starting to boil on the stove. Elena pulled out a chair at the small wooden table by the window and pointed at it. Sit. Elena. Sit down, Adrian. He sat down. She poured him a glass of water from the tap. She set it in front of him. He did not touch it. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat too, and she watched him for a long moment, and then she said, What did you do? He did not answer. What did you do, Adrian? He looked at the water glass. I took care of it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have, Elena. No. No? No. That's not the only answer you have. That's the answer you give other people. That's the answer you give Michael and Berta and the men who work for you. I am not other people, Adrian. 3 days ago, you lay on top of me on the dining room floor with glass in my hair, and you told me to stay, and I stayed, and now you walk in this house, and you will not tell me what you did. That is not going to be how this works. Elena, talk to me. He looked up at her. His face broke. She didn't know any better word for it. Something in it simply came apart. Not tears. Not yet. Something worse than tears. The look of a man who had been holding himself together so tightly for so long that the release of it was a kind of injury. And he put his elbows on the table and his hands over his face, and he sat like that for a long moment. She did not move. She did not reach for him. She had learned, from Thomas Kerr and from the dining room floor, and from 3 years of losing the people who had loved her, that sometimes the correct thing to do was to sit still across the table from somebody and not touch them and let them have the minute they needed. When he spoke, his voice was muffled. I killed him, Elena. I know. I killed him, and I killed 2 of his men, and the other 2 I let go because I wanted them to carry a message. And that message is that he is dead, and his organization is dismantled, and everything he had, I have now, and anybody who touches a line of mine is going to be dealt with the way he was dealt with. That was the message. All right. It's not all right. It's not all right, Elena. I told you, at that altar, I was not a good man. I told you in the kitchen. I told you in the car. I told you every single way I know how to tell somebody a thing, and you kept looking at me like you didn't believe me, and now you have to believe me. Because the man who came in the house 4 days ago is not a man I can be angry about in the way a normal person could be angry. I went to his house, his own house. Do you understand me? I went to his house and I took him out of his bed and Adrian. And I made sure that when his wife woke up, she knew exactly who had done it and exactly why. Because that was what needed to be. Adrian, he stopped. She reached across the table. She took his hands, both of them. She pulled them down from his face gently, and she held them. His hands were shaking. She had not known until that moment that his hands could shake. Look at me, she said. He looked at her. I'm not going anywhere, she said. He shook his head, a small, tight shake. Elena? I said I'm not going anywhere. You should. I know. You should be running out the door right now. I know. I would let you run, Elena. I would let you out the gate. I would tell Michael to take you anywhere you wanted to go. I would give you every cent of that 11 million if you asked me. I would walk you to the car myself. I know you would, Adrian. Then why are you still sitting here? She didn't answer right away. She held his hands. She felt them shake. She thought about her mother at the kitchen sink. She thought about her father on the bridge. She thought about Thomas Kerr in the rain. She thought about a 7-year-old on a bench saying the word sea turtle. She thought about the dress in the white box and the wooden box of art supplies, and a man who had sat across a kitchen island at midnight and told her, flatly, that he was not a good man. Because you are not lying to me, she said. Elena, listen. Listen to me, Adrian. I've had a lot of men in my life tell me they were good. My father was a good man, Adrian. He told me so. Every Christmas, every birthday, every single time he handed me a card with his handwriting in it. I am a good man and I love you, and I am going to take care of you. And then he drove his car off a bridge and left me $11 million of debt and a letter telling another man to come collect me. That was a good man. That was a man who lied to himself and to me my entire life. That isn't... I am not finished, Adrian. He closed his mouth. You, she said, have done nothing but tell me the truth. From the first minute. I'm not going to kiss you unless you want me to. I am not a good man. I bought you because I am selfish. I killed him. I went to his house. You have told me every single ugly thing, Adrian, and you have not once pretended to be anything other than what you are. And do you know what that makes you? A murderer, Elena. A murderer who is honest with me. That's not a small thing. That is not a small thing to me. Elena, I have done things. I know you have. You don't. I know, Adrian. I know about the South Dock. I know about Benny. I know enough. I've known for weeks. I've known enough to run if I wanted to run. And I have not run. Do you understand? No. Then listen harder. She tightened her hands on his. I am sitting in this kitchen, she said, because I have decided to sit in this kitchen, not because you are holding me here, not because Michael is at the gate, not because of $11 million. Do you hear me? I could walk out of this kitchen right now and go anywhere. I could call my Aunt Teresa. She told me, on the night before our wedding, she told me to call her and she would come get me. Did you know that? I could pick up a phone right now and she would have a car in the drive tomorrow. I am not here because I cannot leave. I am here because I have decided. Decided what? Decided you. His face broke again. This time there were tears. He did not make a sound. He did not sob. His mouth stayed closed and his shoulders stayed still, and the tears simply came out of his eyes in two slow, steady lines, and he looked at her across the kitchen table as if she were something he was seeing for the last time. She held his hands. She held on hard. You shouldn't decide me, Elena. Well, I have. You should decide someone else. I don't want to decide someone else. I had my whole life to decide someone else. I'm 26 years old, Adrian. I had plenty of time. I decided you. I am not worth that. That's not your call. He closed his eyes. A long moment passed. Elena. Yes. I need you to understand something. I'm listening. I need you to understand that when I am gone, and I will be gone, Elena, someday, sooner than I would like. When I am gone, you will be the widow of a man whose name is going to keep working against you for 10, 15, 20 years after I am in the ground. You will not have a normal life. You will not have a quiet life. You will not be able to teach community college and live in a small apartment and marry a man who sells insurance. Whatever you build with me, you will keep building after me. That is the shape of this. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes, I can still get you out. Adrian, right now, tonight, I can have you on a plane in 4 hours. A new name, a new country. Enough money that you will never have to think about any of this again. You will be an ocean away by Monday. I can do that, Elena. I can give you that. That is one thing I can actually give you. I will take you to the airport myself. I will watch you walk onto the plane. I will not follow you. I will never try to find you, Elena. I will leave you alone in a way you have no idea how hard that is for me to promise. But I will promise it. I will, if you say the word. She looked at him. She looked at her husband. This man she had not chosen to marry. This man who had paid her father's debt in blood and taken a wife because he could. This man who had sat in a black suit at an altar and looked at her like a ghost. And she said, "No." "Elena." "No, Adrian, I said it already. I'm not going to keep saying it. I'm tired. I am so tired of talking about this. I don't want a plane. I don't want a new country. I don't want to walk around for the rest of my life telling myself that the worst thing that ever happened to me was that I met a man who told me the truth. I don't want that story. I want this one." He did not answer. "Come here," she said. He didn't move. "Come here, Adrian." She let go of his hands and she stood up, and she walked around the corner of the table, and she stood next to his chair. He was still sitting. She put her hand on the back of his head, very gently, and she drew him forward, and his forehead came to rest against her stomach, against the fabric of her sweater, and he sat there, and she felt his shoulders finally let go. He didn't cry loudly. He cried like a man who had never been allowed to cry in front of anyone, which, she suspected, was exactly the truth. Small, contained, shaking. She stood there with her hand on his head, and she did not say anything, because there was nothing that needed to be said. The pot on the stove had boiled over. The water was hissing on the burner. She didn't move to turn it off. It could hiss. After a long time, he said into her sweater, "I don't know how to do this." "What?" "This." "Be held." "Yes." "I know," she said. "I know you don't. That's all right. You'll learn. I'm 36 years old, Elena. Late start." He laughed, a small wet laugh, the first laugh she had ever heard out of him. And he pressed his face harder into her sweater, like he could hide there. And she let him hide there for as long as he needed to. When he finally sat back, his eyes were red and his face was wrecked, and he looked, for the first time since she had known him, about his own age. Not younger, not older. Exactly 36, exactly tired, exactly a man. She sat down in the chair beside his. "Adrian?" "Yes." "I want to talk about the wedding." He blinked. "The wedding?" "Our wedding. I want to talk about it." "What about it?" "I want to do it again." He stared at her. "Elena, not like that one. Not in that church. Not with 30 strangers who work for you staring at me. I want to do it the other way. The way I would have done it if we had been. She stopped. She could not quite say if we had been normal. They were not ever going to be normal. But that was not the deal they had signed. "I want to marry you," she said. "Again. On a day that is not the worst week of my life. In a place where I know the people. Wearing a dress I pick out. Saying the words because I want to say them, not because a priest who was afraid of you needed me to. I want to do that. Elena, and before you say anything, no, this isn't about making it pretty. This isn't about fixing what happened in that church. What happened in that church happened. I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't. I'm asking you to stand in a room with me on a day of my choosing and say I do because I'm asking you to, not because a contract is. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes." "Then will you do it?" He looked at her for a very long time. "Elena," he said, "you don't have to. I know I don't have to. That is the entire point of what I'm asking. I am not doing it because I have to. I am asking you because I want to." He swallowed. "Yes," he said. "Yes?" "Yes, of course I will. Whenever you want, wherever you—" "Good." She stood up. She finally turned off the stove. The burner hissed and popped and went quiet. She dumped the water into the sink. She turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at him, sitting at the little kitchen table with his face red from crying and the untouched glass of water in front of him. And she felt, for the first time since her father had died, like she had picked up a piece of her own life and set it somewhere she had chosen. "One more thing," she said. "Anything. Thomas Kerr?" "Lily is out of surgery. The surgery went well. She's in recovery. I was going to tell you. I'm sorry. I should have led with that." "Oh." She felt her eyes sting. "Oh." She's going to be all right, Elena. Good. And I want to do something. More than what I did. I have been thinking about it. The Kerrs and others. There are a lot of them, Elena. There are a lot of families in this city who got caught between me and people I was fighting. I can't undo what I did to them. But I could. Maybe we could, she said. We could. All right. She wiped her eyes. All right. We're doing that. That's what we're doing. Yes. Good. She came back to the table. She sat down in her chair. She picked up her own glass of water, which she had not touched, and she took a long, slow drink. And then she looked at her husband across the kitchen table, and she said in the matter-of-fact voice that her mother had used when she was running a household, "What do you want for dinner?" He blinked at her. I don't, because the potatoes are ruined. Oh, I'll make pasta. All right. You don't have a preference. I don't, Elena. Fine, pasta. She got up. She started pulling things out of the pantry. She did not look at him. She did not want to look at him, not for a minute, because she was afraid of what she would see, and she was afraid of what he would see, and she needed a minute to hold a box of pasta in her hands in the normal kitchen of the normal life she was choosing, and be a woman with a husband she was cooking dinner for. Behind her, very quietly, Adrian said, "Thank you, Elena." She didn't turn around. For what? For staying. She stood with her hand on the pantry door and her eyes on a box of penny, and she felt something in her chest, something that had been clenched tight since her father's funeral, something that had sat there like a fist for weeks, slowly, carefully, begin to open. "You're welcome," she said. And then, because she was not going to cry anymore, not tonight, not in this kitchen, she shut the pantry door and she filled a new pot with water and she set it on the stove. Berta, upstairs, sitting on her cot in the hallway, listening to the house the way she had been listening to it for 15 years, heard the burner click on. She heard, a few minutes later, the scrape of a chair as a man finally got up from a kitchen table and came to stand at a counter beside a woman who was stirring a pot. She did not hear them speak. She did not need to. She lay down on the cot, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and for the first time in 4 nights, she slept. They set the date for the first Saturday in May. Elena picked it without thinking, without consulting a calendar. Her mother's birthday had been the first week of May, and the tulips were always out, and something in her wanted her mother to be in the room in some small way, even if nobody else knew it. She told Adrian the date at breakfast. He wrote it down in his notebook, the little black one he carried in his inside pocket, and he said, "Whatever you need, Elena." And that was the end of the conversation about the date. The conversation about everything else took the next 3 months. She had not expected to fight with him about a wedding. She had expected, honestly, that he would say yes to anything she wanted, because he had said yes to everything for 6 weeks running, and she had started to worry that he would never say no to her again, which was its own kind of problem. But Adrian, to her surprise, had opinions. He had opinions about the flowers. He had opinions about the food. He had a strong and completely unexpected opinion about the music, which he expressed one night in the library by saying, "Elena, I'm going to beg you, please, do not have a string quartet." And when she asked him why, he said, "Because we got married once in a room that sounded like a funeral, and I would rather die than do it again." She laughed. That was new. Laughing with him. She was still getting used to the sound of her own laugh in his house. "All right," she said. "No string quartet. What do you want then?" "I don't know." "You don't know." I have not thought about this, Elena. I have not had occasion to think about what music should be played at a wedding. You pick." Adrian. "Yes." "You just told me you had a strong opinion. Now you don't have an opinion at all." "My opinion," he said, "is no string quartet. After that, I don't have one." "That is a cop-out." "I know." "You have to pick something, Adrian. It's your wedding." "It's your wedding, Elena." "It is our wedding." He looked at her for a long moment. They were sitting in the library, her with a notebook in her lap, and him in the armchair across from her, and the light was coming in sideways through the tall window because it was late afternoon, and she watched his face do the small, subtle thing it did now when something moved through him that he wasn't ready for. "Our wedding," he said, quietly. "Yes, Adrian, ours." "All right. Pick something. I genuinely don't know, Elena. Pick a song. Any song. The first song that comes into your head. He paused. There was a... My grandmother used to listen to... He stopped. It's Portuguese. It's an old song. It's called Coimbra. She had it on a record. She used to play it when she cooked. I haven't heard it in 20 years. It's very... I don't know. It's too sad for a wedding. What's it about? A city? A university? A love that didn't work out. That's very sad for a wedding, Adrian. I said it was. We're using it. He blinked. Elena, not for the aisle, but somewhere. At the reception. I want to hear it. I want to know what your grandmother listened to. She stopped. Go on, he said. I want to know about your life before all of this. I want to know about your grandmother. I want to know what she cooked. I want to know where you grew up. I want to know the names of the streets. She took a breath. I married a stranger, Adrian. I am in the middle of getting unmarried from a stranger and married to a person. That's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to know you. He was quiet for a moment. She cooked. A lot of fish. She cooked cod mostly. My grandfather was a fisherman when he was young, and even when he wasn't anymore, she cooked like he was. She had a kitchen the size of a closet. She kept a radio on the windowsill, and she played that record more than any of the others. What was her name? Rosa. Rosa, Elena said. Yes. I would have liked her. You would have hated her, Elena. She was a terrible woman. She was a mean, sharp, gossiping old woman, and she loved her husband, and she loved her son, and she thought everyone else on earth was a fool. She hit me with a wooden spoon once when I was 7 years old for saying a word she didn't like. Elena laughed. All right, she said. I would have hated her, but I would have been fascinated by her. Yes, Adrian said. You would have been fascinated by her. Elena wrote Coimbra at the top of a page in her notebook. That was how they built it, song by song. Flower by flower, name by name. She would ask him something, some small thing, and he would hesitate, and he would tell her, and she would write it down somewhere. Not because she was cataloging him, though that, she understood, was part of it, but because she was making a map. The man she had married in a church on 6th Avenue had been a blank. The man she was going to marry in May was going to be a person with a grandmother named Rosa, a person with a scar on his thumb from a dog bite when he was 10, a person who had, it turned out, been a bad student in every subject except history, and a person whose favorite food in the world was, absurdly, a grilled cheese sandwich. He admitted that one at midnight in the kitchen, the way a man might admit a crime. A grilled cheese. Yes. Adrian, you own a wine cellar. I have seen it. Berta had to ask me to put back a bottle I took out because it was older than me. And your favorite food is a grilled cheese. Yes. We have been married for 10 weeks, Adrian. Why have I never seen you eat a grilled cheese? Berta doesn't make them. Make your own. I don't know how, Elena. You don't know how to make a grilled cheese? No. You've been rich too long. I know. She made him one, that night, at midnight, in the enormous cold kitchen, while he sat on the counter and watched like a man observing a small and mysterious ritual. She burned the first side. She over-buttered the bread. It was a bad grilled cheese. He ate the entire thing in 6 bites and then looked at her with an expression that could have ended wars, and she had to turn her back and pretend to wash the pan so that he would not see her face. The wedding was small. That was the first rule. 30 people. That was the number she landed on, not because it meant anything. It was, she understood much later, almost exactly the number of strangers who had been in the church on 6th Avenue, and some part of her had deliberately not told Adrian that, but because it was the number of people she could name on a single piece of notebook paper. Her Aunt Teresa. Her old roommate from college, Jenny, who had been the first person she had called the morning after her father died, and who had flown in the next day and slept on her couch for a week. The 2 friends from the community college where she had taught, Marta and Yusuf, who had sent flowers to the funeral and who had, very carefully, stopped asking questions when they realized Elena wasn't going to answer them. A few of Berta's grown children, because Berta was family now, even if nobody had said the word out loud. And on Adrian's side, Michael, Roger, a handful of the others. That was it. Nobody from his old life. None of the men in good suits who had filled the pews on 6th Avenue. Not a single person whose name had ever appeared in a newspaper article about a trial that was dropped. When she had asked him about it, carefully, gently, at breakfast one morning, he had said, "Elena, the people I would invite from that world are either dead, in prison, or people I do not want in a room with you." And she had not asked again. They held it at the estate. In the back garden where the south lawn sloped down toward the tree line, Berta had once told her not to cross. By May, the hydrangeas had come in and the grass had thickened and the fountain in the front drive had been turned back on. Elena had spent 2 months with a landscape architect, a thin, serious woman named Priya, who had not been told whose wedding she was working on until the second meeting, and who, to her credit, had not missed a beat when she was told. They had planted things Elena picked out herself. White roses for her mother, yellow tulips for no reason except that she had always loved them, a small cluster of lavender near the stone steps because she wanted the reception air to smell like something that reminded her of her grandmother's porch. Her Aunt Teresa came 2 days early. Elena had not known if she was going to come. She had called Teresa 3 weeks after the wedding on 6th Avenue from the kitchen phone, and she had said, "I'm all right. I think I'm all right." And her aunt had started crying so hard Elena couldn't make out what she was saying. And then Teresa had hung up and called back an hour later and said, "Elena, if you ever tell me you are not all right, I will be on a plane that hour. Do you understand me?" And Elena had said yes, and they had talked once a week since. And when Elena had told her about the second wedding, Teresa had listened in silence for a long time and then said, "Honey, what is his house like?" And Elena had said, "I think you should come see it yourself." Teresa arrived on a Thursday with 2 suitcases and a bottle of bourbon. She stood in the foyer and looked up at the curving staircase and said, "Jesus." She looked at the bare walls. She looked at the marble floor. She said, "Jesus," again. Elena hugged her. "It grows on you." "It better," Teresa cried when she saw Elena's dress. Elena had picked it herself this time. She had gone into the city with Jenny. Adrian had not come, had sent Michael in a second car, and had stayed a block away at a cafe drinking coffee for 5 hours while Elena tried on dresses, because he had understood, without having to be told, that this was not a thing he was going to be present for. And she had picked a dress that was nothing like the one in the white box. That one had been lace and long sleeves and a high neck. This one was simple, a sheath, ivory, not white, with a low back and a soft skirt that moved when she walked. It had no history. It was not her mother's, and it was not anyone's grandmother's. It was hers. She put her mother's pearls on with it. Those, she thought, looking at herself in the mirror the morning of the wedding, were the history she wanted. The ceremony was in the afternoon. There was no aisle. She had said no to an aisle. She had walked down enough aisles, she had told him, to last her the rest of her life. Instead, the 30 guests sat in a loose gathering of white wooden chairs in the garden, and she and Adrian stood at the top of the lawn under a simple wooden arch that Priya had woven through with ivy, and they faced each other. And there was a woman from the county who had come out to officiate because neither of them had wanted a priest this time. The woman's name was Paula. She was in her 50s. She had a kind, square face, and she had told Elena, in their one preparatory meeting, that she had married over 400 couples in her career, and that she could tell within 90 seconds which ones were going to make it. She had not told Elena what she thought about them. That, Elena had decided, was a good sign. The music played. Not Coimbra. Coimbra would come later at the reception. Something simpler, a song her mother had liked, an old recording with a woman's voice and a single piano. Jenny walked out first because Elena had asked her to and stood off to the side. Then Elena came out of the back doors of the house on her Aunt Teresa's arm, and she walked down the grass toward Adrian, and she did not stumble this time. She did not hold her breath. She looked at him the entire way. He was in a dark suit, no tie. She had asked him for no tie. His hands were not folded in front of him the way they had been in the church on 6th Avenue. They were at his sides, and they were open, and when she got close enough to see his face, she saw that he was crying, quietly, the way he had cried in the kitchen 3 months ago, tears running down with no sound, and that he was not ashamed of it. That, more than anything else, was what got her. He was not ashamed of it. He stood in his own garden in front of 30 people, and he let them see him cry, because he had decided, in a way she did not fully understand but entirely trusted, that he was done hiding. She came to stand in front of him. Paula smiled. Friends, Paula said. We are here because two people have chosen each other. That's all this is. Two people, choosing. It's the oldest thing in the world, and it's the bravest, and it doesn't get any easier just because humans have been doing it for thousands of years. They're still here. They still picked each other today. That's what we came for. Elena felt a tear run down her face and did not wipe it away. Adrian, Paula said, do you have anything you want to say? He had written something. Elena knew he had written something. She had seen him, late at night, sitting at the desk in his study with a yellow legal pad, crossing things out. And she had agreed not to read it, and she had not read it. He took a folded piece of paper out of his jacket pocket. His hand shook a little when he unfolded it. He did not pretend it didn't. He looked at the paper. He folded it back up and put it away. I can't read it, he said. I'm sorry, I wrote it. I spent a long time writing it. I can't read it. There was a small, soft laugh from the chairs. Teresa, Elena thought, and maybe Jenny. Adrian smiled faintly. Elena, he said, I don't know how to do this. I am a man with a lot of words for a lot of things, and I have no idea what the right words are for this. So I am going to say the thing I know how to say, and then I am going to stop. He took her hands. I bought a woman once, he said. I want to say that out loud. I want you to hear me say it. I bought a woman in a church on 6th Avenue, and I stood at an altar and I said I do, and I meant it. And I have been ashamed of that day every single day since. Not because of what I felt, because of how I made her feel. I am sorry, Elena. I am so sorry. I know I have told you, but I wanted to tell you here, in front of these people, because I want it on the record. The first time I married you, I did it wrong. This time I am asking, will you let me marry you, Elena? For real, starting now. Itish. She couldn't speak for a second. She took a breath. Yes, she said. Paula turned to her. Elena. She had also written something. She had written it on the back of a grocery receipt 2 nights ago at 1 in the morning because she hadn't been able to sleep. She pulled it out of the little pocket Jenny had sewn into the waistband of the dress because Elena had insisted on it. She looked at it. She put it away. Me either, she said, and there was a laugh from the chairs. A real one now, from more people. And Adrian laughed too, a short, startled laugh. And she loved him. She loved him so much in that second, she could feel it in her teeth. I'm going to try, she said. I'm going to try to say it. Just bear with me. Take your time, Paula said. Elena looked at him. Adrian, when my father died, I thought the worst thing in the world had happened to me. And then 3 days later, a man I had never met took me out of my house and put me in a car and married me. And I thought, now the worst thing in the world has happened to me. And I was angry about it for a long time. I was angry at my father. I was angry at Vincent Caro. I was angry at the priest. I was angry at you. I was angry at every single person who had been in a position to keep me out of that church and had not done it. She paused. I am not angry anymore. She swallowed. That is not because what happened was right. It wasn't. I want to say that out loud too. It was not right, Adrian. It should not have happened. If I could go back, I would stand in the hall of my father's house, and I would tell Vincent Caro to go to hell, and I would tell you, when you came to get me, that I was not for sale. I would do that if I could. That's the truth. He did not flinch. He nodded very slightly. But I can't, she said. I can't go back. And I spent too many weeks trying. I spent too many nights in your house staring at a ceiling and trying to unwind a thing that could not be unwound. And then somewhere, I don't know when, I stopped. I stopped trying to unwind it. I looked at what I had instead. And I had a man who told me the truth. I had a man who never, not once, pretended to be anything he wasn't. I had a house that got quiet when I walked into it because everyone in it was trying to figure out what I needed. I had a husband who sent me a box of charcoal because I had said, in passing, that I used to draw. Her voice caught. Adrian, I did not pick you. Not at first, but I am picking you now. I am picking you today. I am picking you every day after this. And when I am old and I think back on the worst week of my life, I am going to think about how that week brought me to you. And I am going to be grateful. I am. Not for the debt, not for the wedding, for you, the person, the one I'm marrying today. His jaw was shaking. "That's all I've got," she said. Paula wiped her eye openly with the back of her hand. "Rings," she said. They had new ones. Adrian had said, "I don't want you wearing the one I put on you at 6th Avenue. I hate that ring. Let's get new ones." And Elena had said, "Agreed." And they had gone together to a small shop in Little Arden and picked out 2 plain gold bands because neither of them wanted anything that looked like money. Plain bands. That was what they wanted. The 2 old rings had been put in a box in Adrian's desk, not thrown away. They had not known what to do with them. Exactly. And there they had sat. And there, probably, they would sit. They exchanged the new ones. "By the authority granted to me," Paula said, "and by the more important authority of your own choosing, I pronounce you married. Adrian, you can kiss her if she wants you to." "Do you want me to?" he said very quietly, so that only she could hear. "Yes," she said. "God, yes." He kissed her. It was not a long kiss, it was not a showy kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had been waiting a long time to do something correctly and was not going to rush it. The chairs erupted. Her Aunt Teresa stood up. Jenny stood up. Berta, in the back row, stood up and clapped with her hands held high over her head, which was, Elena realized later, the only time in 15 years anyone had seen Berta applaud anything. The sun was doing something with the light through the trees, something that made the ivy on the arch look lit up from inside. And Elena stood there with Adrian's hands on her face and thought, "This is the picture. This is the picture of my wedding. This one. Not the other one. This." The reception went until 3 in the morning. It was, Elena understood later, the first party in that house in a very long time. Berta kept saying so, under her breath, as she moved through the rooms with trays. "First music in this house in years, ma'am. First dancing." Elena danced with her Aunt Teresa. She danced with Jenny. She danced with Yusuf, who was a terrible dancer and who made her laugh so hard she had to sit down halfway through. She danced, finally, with Adrian to Coimbra, because he had asked Berta to play it as the last song of the night, and Berta had done it. He held her while it played. He did not say anything. He did not need to. When it was over and the last guests had gone to the guest wing where Berta had set up rooms, and her Aunt Teresa had kissed her forehead and told her, "You look like your mother tonight, honey. You look just like her." And Elena had finally let herself cry for the first time all day. When all of that was done, and the house was quiet, and it was 3:30 in the morning, she walked with Adrian out onto the back lawn in her bare feet. Her shoes were somewhere. She did not know where. She did not care. They sat down on the stone steps. The fountain was on. The hydrangeas were closed for the night. "Adrian." "Yes." "I want to tell you something." "All right." "I have been thinking about what you said, about the families." He looked at her. The Kerrs, and the others you mentioned. You said you wanted to do something. I have been thinking. I want us to do it for real. Not a check. Not a check every Christmas. Something structured, something that keeps working. I want us to start something. A foundation. A foundation. Something that helps the families who got caught in the middle of things. Kids whose parents work dock jobs that don't exist anymore. Kids whose fathers went to prison. Kids whose mothers are sick and nobody is paying for the surgery. I don't care what we call it. I want us to start one. He was quiet. "Elena." "Yes." "Money from where it came from." "I know." "Does that bother you?" "It bothers me all the time, Adrian, but I've been thinking about that too. That money is in this house. It is not going to stop being in this house. I can't unmake where it came from. Nobody can. What I can do is look at it and decide where it's going to go now. And where I want it to go is into a place where a 7-year-old girl like Lily Kerr doesn't have to wait until her father walks up to a man in the rain with a photograph. I want there to be a place she can go. I want there to be a phone number. I want there to be a door." He did not speak for a long moment. "All right," he said. "Yes?" "Yes, we're doing that. Tomorrow. We'll start tomorrow." "Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is our honeymoon." He smiled. "The day after." "The day after." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Adrian." "Yes." "I want to tell you one more thing." "All right. I'm not going to pretend I know how to be married to you. I don't. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to get angry at you about things that aren't fair to be angry about. I'm going to There are going to be days, Adrian, where I wake up and I think about the first wedding and I hate you for a full hour before I come downstairs. I want you to know that. I don't want you to be surprised. I won't be surprised. And you are going to do things because of who you are, because of what you do. You are going to do things that I am not going to like, and some of them you are going to do without telling me, and I am going to find out, and we are going to fight. I want you to know that too. I know that, Elena. All right. I just wanted to say it out loud. On the day. So it's part of what we're agreeing to, not the dress, not the song, this part, the hard part. He took her hand. Agreed, he said. They sat there for a long time. The fountain ran. Somewhere in the trees beyond the lawn, something moved. An animal, maybe, not a threat. And Adrian didn't flinch this time. He had stopped flinching, she noticed. He had stopped, in the last 3 months, treating every sound in the dark like an enemy. Something in him was letting its shoulders down. Adrian. Yes. Do you remember the little boy, the one you told me about? The one on the bench at the fundraiser? Yes. Did you ever find out what happened to him? He was quiet. His name was Daniel, he said. His mother survived. She's fine now. She teaches math at a high school in the valley. Daniel is in college. He just started last fall. He's not a marine biologist. He's in law school now, which I don't know if you remember him saying, but it's what he wants to do. His grandmother still sends me a Christmas card every year because I paid for some of his schooling later when his mother got sick again, and they found out it was me, and they... Adrian. Yes. You paid for his schooling. Some of it. Not all. Because of 20 minutes I spent on a bench with him when I was 18 years old. Yes, she laughed quietly. It was not a funny laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who was realizing something about the man she had married. Adrian Moreau. Yes. You are a liar. Elena, you told me you were not a good man. You said it to my face. In a car, in a kitchen, in front of an altar. You said it over and over, Adrian, and you made sure I heard it, and I believed you. And you were paying some kid's way through college because of a day you watched a stranger sit on a bench with him. He did not answer. You are not a good man, she said. You are right. You are not a good man, Adrian. You have done things I would have hated you for if I had seen them. You're going to do more things. I know you are. But you are a better man than you have told me you are. And I think you have spent a long time being the kind of man who would never say that about himself. And I am telling you, because I am your wife now, and I have the right. You are a better man than you think you are. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, I'm going to try to be. I know you are. I don't know if I'll manage it, Elena. I know that too. But I'm going to try. That, she said, is all I have ever asked of you. They sat on the steps until the sky started to turn. They did not talk much after that. There was not a lot more to say. Eventually, Elena leaned all the way against him, and he put his arm around her, and she closed her eyes, and she let herself, for the first time since she had been 18 years old, lean all her weight on somebody else and not check to see if they could hold it. He held it. He was not perfect. He was never going to be. There would be, in the years that came, fights she didn't want to remember, and nights she slept in the guest room, and mornings she woke up furious at the shape of her own life. There would be the foundation and the long, slow work of it, and the children who came to their door, and the ones they couldn't save. There would be Berta, who lived in that house for 7 more years before she retired to the coast to live with one of her daughters, and whose funeral Elena would cry at until she could not stand. There would be an old friend from Adrian's past who came back one winter and had to be dealt with, and Elena would not ask, and Adrian would not tell, and she would live with that, and he would live with her living with it, and that was what their marriage was. There would also be a morning, 2 years after the second wedding, when Elena would come into the kitchen with a small white strip in her hand and would sit down at the kitchen table without saying anything, and Adrian would look at her from across the coffee, and he would understand, and he would put his hand over his mouth and cry the way he had cried the night he came home from Wilder's house, only this time for a different reason entirely. There would be a little girl. They would name her Rosa, after his terrible grandmother, and she would grow up in that house, the quiet house, The house that used to feel like a waiting room, and the walls would no longer be bare. There would be drawings on them, charcoal studies, watercolors, a picture framed of a 7-year-old named Lily Kerr at her own 8th birthday party, holding a cake and a photograph of a sea turtle she had drawn by hand and sent to Elena in the mail. The house would not be safe. It would never be safe, not the way normal houses were safe. But it would be lived in. It would be loved in. And that, Elena came to understand, was the only thing anybody ever really got. But all that was later. On the stone steps, in the last hour before dawn of the first Saturday in May, in the ivory dress she had picked herself with her mother's pearls cool against her collarbone, Elena Moreau, she could say the name to herself now, quietly, without flinching, leaned against her husband and watched the sky go gray. Adrian. Yes. I'm going to fall asleep out here. All right. Don't carry me. All right. I'm serious. I want to walk. I want to go inside on my own feet. All right, Elena. She sat up. She took his hand. She stood slowly because her feet were sore and her back hurt, and the dress was heavier than she had expected, and she pulled him up after her. They walked across the lawn together in the thin gray light. The grass was wet. The hydrangeas were starting to open. At the back door, she stopped. She turned and looked out one more time at the garden where it had happened, at the arch with the ivy, at the empty white chairs in their loose, unruly rows, at the lavender by the stone steps, at the fountain still running because nobody had thought to turn it off. Then she turned around and she went inside and she closed the door behind her. And whatever the world had meant to do with her, whatever her father's debt had meant to make of her, whatever the man on 6th Avenue had meant to buy when he put his name on a contract, the world did not get to decide. She did. She had. And she always would.